Thank you for being present tonight. We're looking at the building of the tabernacle, the preparation for it in the book of Exodus. And we are to Roman numeral 5 on your outline. The individuals who are to make the things to be made. And this involves the first 11 verses of Exodus 31 and Exodus 35:30 through 36:3. And in our time together last week, we had covered A, B, and C on your outline. So we're ready to begin now with D. The administrator of the work was Moses. David, is this on? I don't need it, but do you need it?
Does not look, maybe turn it on from there.
I was hit by a gremlin. The administrator of the work was Moses. 31 verses 1, 6, and 11. Let's go there. 31:1. Then Jehovah spoke to Moses, saying. Then verse 6. And I, indeed I, have appointed with him Aholiab, the son of Ahisamach, and that's not really the way you say that word, we'll talk about it later, of the tribe of Dan, and I have put wisdom in the hearts of all the gifted artisans, that they may make all that I have commanded you. And then verse 11, and the anointing oil and sweet incense for the holy, according to all that I have commanded you, they shall do. And then, if you turn to, hold your finger there and turn to 35, and look at verse 30. Moses said to the children of Israel, see, Jehovah has called by name Bezalel, the son of Uri, the son of Hur, of the tribe of Judah. So the administrator of this work was Moses. He is over all of it. He is to see that it is made according to the what? The pattern that I showed you in the mount, Jehovah said. So you're going to have a cascading cast of characters, but Moses is the leader. He's the head of it. Then in letter E, the appointed workers. That takes in the first 6 verses of chapter 31 and chapter 35:30 through 36:1. These willingly gave more than 6 months of their time and talents to the building of the tabernacle. Now, one of the reasons it could have been made that quickly is there are about 2.5 million people in Israel. So you have a lot of folks who would come together and work, and there's an old Indian saying, translated means many hands make short work. So the more people who work, the quicker the time is in getting the work complete. So first of all, you have Bezalel. I gave you Young's pronunciation of that word. Bezalel. If I talk to you about it, I very likely will call him Bezalel. I've done that for too many years now. But if we were accurately, as best we can tell, the Hebrew name, Bezalel. So let's look at the first 5 verses of 31. Then Jehovah spoke to Moses, saying, see, I have called by name Bezalel, the son of Uri, the son of Hur, of the tribe of Judah. And I have filled him with the spirit of Elohim in wisdom, in understanding, in knowledge, and in all workmanship, to design artistic works, to work in gold, in silver, in bronze, you may have brass if you're reading King James, in cutting jewels for setting, in carving wood, and to work in all workmanship. So here he is set forth. Now go to 35 and look at verse 30. Moses said to the children of Israel, "See, Jehovah has called by name Bezalel, the son of Uri, the son of Hur, of the tribe of Judah. And he has filled him with the Spirit of God, in wisdom and understanding, in knowledge, and all manner of workmanship, to design artistic works, to work in gold and silver and bronze, in cutting jewels for setting, in carving wood, and to work in all manner of artistic workmanship. And he has put in his heart the ability to teach. In him and Aholiab, the son of Ahisamach, of the tribe of Dan. He has filled them with skill to do all manner of work of the engraver and the designer and the tapestry maker, in blue, purple, and scarlet, and fine linen, and of the weaver, those who do every work, and those who design artistic works. And Bezalel and Aholiab, and every gifted artisan in whom Jehovah has put wisdom and understanding, to know how to do all manner of work for the service of the sanctuary, shall do according to all that Jehovah has commanded." All right, now you notice we didn't stop at the chapter division. Then Moses called Bezalel and Aholiab and every gifted artisan in whose heart Jehovah has put wisdom, everyone whose heart was stirred to come and do the work. So we begin with this Bezalel. Notice that he was called by name by Jehovah. Now that must have been quite an honor. Out of 2.5 million people, including Moses, Aaron, Miriam, the 70 elders who have been set apart, to have Jehovah call your name. Say, "You're the one that I have chosen to do this work." So you think about the honor. And then when you do some Bible study, David, your good sermon topic would be people called by name by Jehovah. You will find there are a number of them through the Bible whose name Jehovah would call to do a certain work. And you think particularly of Mary, who was called to be the mother of Jesus. What an honor. And Gabriel said to her when he visited her, "You are highly favored." And God is working through you. So he was called by name by Jehovah. Then his, we might say, pedigree was given. He was the son of Uri, the son of Hur, of the tribe of Judah. Turn to 1 Chronicles chapter 2. And look at verse 20. You have Hur begot Uri, and Uri begat Bezalel. Here you have this genealogy that came through Hezron. And Bezalel is there. So this did 3 things we note. It gave him, number 1, the proper credentials to be recognized as a leader in the work. These men who are his forefathers carried a place of honor in the tribe, a place of authority. Second, he is following in the footsteps of his father, who had served in times of need. Now, who is Who is Bezalel's father? Uriah. And who's his father? Hur. Turn back to Exodus 17. When Amalek attacked Israel, Jehovah told Moses to go up and raise his hands. When he raised his hands, Israel prevailed, but when he got tired and let his hands down, Amalek prevailed. And so in verse 10, Joshua did as Moses said to him, and fought with Amalek, and Moses, Aaron, and Hur went up to the top of the hill. So it was when Moses held up his hand that Israel prevailed. When he let down his hand, Amalek prevailed. But Moses' hands became heavy, so they took a stone and put it under him, and he sat on it. And Aaron and Hur supported his hands, one on one side and the other on the other side, and his hands were steady until the going down of the sun. Then turn to Exodus 24. Moses getting ready to go on the mountain. Verse 14, Exodus 24. He said to the elders, "Wait here for us until we come back to you. Indeed, Aaron and Hur are with you. If any man has a difficulty, let him go to them." Now, I use the word father the way the Bible uses it, in order to help you to see when the Bible says someone is someone's father, it may be using that term to mean relative. Not necessarily the one near to him, one right before him, his regular father the way we look at it. Remember, Israel is said to have as her fathers Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And yet you have generations that come and go, removed from these three. So learn, when you see father, you need to look at what? Context he has used. And then number three, when the tribes encamped around the tabernacle, Bezalel is in the first tribe in the encampment. Turn to Numbers 2. Numbers 2, beginning in verse 2. "Every one of the children of Israel shall count by his own standard, besides the emblems of his father's houses. They shall count some distance from the tabernacle of meeting. On the east side, toward the rising of the sun." Now notice that. The east side is sometimes designated as the rising of the sun. So you know, all the way back in the time of Numbers, the sun rose in the east. And that hadn't changed. Now, if I said toward the going down of the sun, what would we be saying? The west side. Now, you need to know that, because often, whichever side of the Jordan River is being considered, is spoken of toward the sun rising or toward the going down of the sun. And that tells you if they're on the east side or west side of Jordan. Those of the standard of the forces with Judah shall camp according to their armies, and Nahshon, the son of Amminadab, shall be the leader of the children of Judah. So Bezalel is of the tribe of Judah. His grandfather Hur was a great man in helping Moses. And when the tribes camp around the tabernacle, when they start or stop their marches, Bezalel is in the camp of Judah, the first camp on the east. So those three things about him we see. Questions or comments at this point?
I'm going to ask a question. Him being filled with the Holy Ghost, or the Holy Spirit, would that be similar to, well, I know, is it similar to the apostles?
I'm about to begin to commence to talk about that.
Okay, I'll be quiet.
We'll see.
I have a question.
It's a good question, and I want to answer.
Do we know what happened to her?
I don't.
You haven't guessed?
I don't.
No, okay.
I had another footnote too that I want to mention, and I'll have to check it out, but I have Betziel in the shadow of God, the name, meaning that.
That may be correct. You can perform a quick handy-dandy Google search
Yes,
probably and find that out.
I had it footnoted in my Bible.
I looked it up, it is that, in the shadow, or it says in the protection of God.
Okay? And what would clue you in that it had something to do with God? The E-L, hail. You got God's name there, so you know, even if you didn't look it up and didn't know the meaning, you knew it had some association with the name of God. So that's very good. Thank you. And if I don't cover what you have in mind on the Spirit, you ask again when we've gone through. Little C. Anyone else to this point? Good questions. He was inspired by Jehovah to do the work he was given to do. Now let's look at his inspiration. 31:3, I filled him with the Spirit of Elohim. Now there is no article. It's like Genesis 1:1. Ruach Elohim contains in itself the idea of singularity, since God has but one Spirit. Now, you all realize when we talk about the Godhead, God is one being with three essences. So we're going to have God, the one that's referred to more often as Father. We're going to have the Word, who will become the Son. And we have the Spirit. These three essences are all God. But they function in different ways. Jesus is God. The Spirit is God. God is God. And you'll see it used that way sometimes. So he put in him God, the Spirit of God. Now, verse 31 of 35, you have the very same thing. So you have a repetition of this. The Spirit of God is said to have directed him in wisdom, in understanding, or intelligence, in knowledge, and in all manner of workmanship. Now this showed the breadth of his ability. Turn to 1 Kings 7. 1 Kings 7 and verse 14. Hiram comes from Tyre. He was the son of a widow from the tribe of Naphtali. His father, a man of Tyre, a bronze worker, He was filled with wisdom and understanding and skill and working with all kinds of bronze work. So he came to King Solomon and did all his work. Now he had all these abilities, the breadth of his ability, but there's no statement with Hiram that he was inspired. But there is with Bezalel. He had the Spirit of God. Now Jehovah not only called the workers, but he equipped them for the work. And that's a point I want you to get. He not only called the workers, but he equipped them for the work. God never asked anyone to do anything they could not do. And if they did not have the natural ability, and yet he wanted them to do that work, he provided that ability. In that sense, there is quite a great parallel to the apostles. And the miraculous that the apostles had, we call their credentials. This is also the credential or credentials of Bezalel. That God inspired him to be able to do all these things. So he called the workers and he equipped them for the work. And that was needed in the church in the first century until what? What was the terminus?
Till the truth was fulfilled.
Till what?
Till all the truth was fulfilled.
Revealed.
Revealed.
Till the word was revealed and no. Revealed and confirmed. Revealed and confirmed. And then the need for the equipment, the equipping, ended. They no longer needed the miraculous. Now the people have the New Testament. But up until that time, when an apostle went somewhere to preach, he couldn't say, now, I'm leaving you a New Testament to tell you how to function. So what would they do instead of leaving them a New Testament? The apostle went somewhere, and he was going to leave. What would he do to allow the congregation to function properly?
Could have laid hands on
He'd
them,
lay hands on them, and by doing so,
empowering them with the Holy Spirit.
confer on them the miraculous gifts of the Spirit. So they could preach and confirm and be accurate until the completed New Testament was given. Good. You have that concept.
Would that be a shadow?
Sir?
Could I use that in a lesson as a shadow of things to come? Would there be confirmation? That would be the miraculous.
I would have difficulty doing that because the miraculous was not really a shadow of the confirmed word. It was the ability to confirm the word that they were preaching. I think I'd have some difficulty with that. Yes.
So since we read that about the temple not having the Spirit, did they still have instructions to go by to build the temple?
You've lost me on the temple didn't have the Spirit.
Well, the guy went over here that we read about.
Oh, Hiram.
Yeah. He didn't-
Hiram just had the skill to prepare that lumber and all that woodwork and do whatever it needed doing. He had the ability to do that.
Right, by God's instructions still?
We are not told that. Solomon, well, let me see if I can say it this way. And you do your own study on this. It appears to me that they had the tabernacle as their pattern. So no matter how ornamental they built the temple, it still had to include the sanctuary that had the court, so you would have the altar of burnt offering, then that had the holy place where you'd have the candlestick and the table of showbread and the altar of incense. Out in the court you'd have the laver, and that had the most holy place that had the Ark of the Covenant. Now they had the instructions of how to build every bit of that already, that had been passed down, at least given to them by means of the tabernacle. However, the miraculous was still available at the time of Solomon, plus the prophets were prophesying. So very likely they had the pattern, and how much Jehovah may have miraculously equipped anybody to do anything, I would have to have a text that suggested that, and I cannot recall one.
Because we have text for the, right here.
Absolutely, no doubt about it. No doubt about this. And I may be, since you're asking me cold on that, I may be slipping a cog as to where there would be one, but I don't recall one off the top of my head that would say they were inspired to do it. That's, you do your own study on that, in case I'm just not calling it up. That's a really good question. But we know here, there's no doubt here. I don't get the impression with Hiram, though, in 1 Kings 7, that he was inspired to do that. I don't see that in that text. It's just he had that ability. That was the breadth of his ability. And when you read all that, you probably could put names on that of people you know that are able to do that kind of work and have that kind of skill. So, but you all like do more checking on that, and if you find something I'm missing, bring it up. Right? Very good question. Anyone else? All right, now we move to Bezalel's work. What is he to do? Verses 4 and 5, and 35, 32 through 36:1. Number 1, he was to devise skillful works. Now this may have reference to an ability to design the things that are to be made. God gave them the pattern, and he'd have the ability, miraculously given or inspired so how to do, to make the design the way they are. He was to work in gold, silver, and brass, and we'll see as we look at the various items what was to be gold, what was to be silver, what was to be brass, and it's pretty minute in what's given. And then he was to work in cutting of stones for setting. So there'd have to be some shaping of those stones to set them in the various things, like the breastplate, the ephod of the breastplate. There would be the stones that would need to be set. So he had all of this. And you take those verses 4 and 5, and then 35, 32, and 33, and you have this list that I have here before you. You don't have to worry about trying to copy it down, because you have it right here in your text. This is the work that he was to do. Furthermore, you get down to verse 5, he was to work in carving of wood. And the word carving is the same Hebrew word that's translated cutting in this verse. In cutting jewels for setting, in carving wood, same word. He was to work in all manner of skillful workmanship, and we're not given a breakdown of what all that involved. But I really want to hone in on 35, 34. He was to teach others how to work. And he has put in his heart the ability to teach. in him and Aholiab, the son of Ahisamach, of the tribe of Dan. Notice they not only had this ability, but they were inspired to be able to teach it to other people. Now, there again would be a parallel in some way to the work of the apostles, to the work of any inspired teacher, prophet. And so you're inspired to teach others. 2 Timothy 2:2, Paul said to Timothy, the things you've learned of me among many witnesses, the same commit to faithful men who shall be able to teach others also. So notice he was inspired to be able to say to the worker next to him, now here's how you do this. Here's how you make this. So he can involve other people in the work that's being done by being able to instruct them correctly. Now, don't lose sight of the fact that we have a pattern. And as you go and as we go and see the minute details that are given, you have a pattern for all of it. Everything that's made, God said, here's how I want it made. All right, so you have an inspired man or inspired men. All right, they are able to teach others. We don't have any kind of idea that when Bezalel and Aholiab taught these other people that they were inspired. We don't have any idea they were inspired. So you had inspired people teaching folks how to do things without their having to be inspired to do it. So the Holy Spirit equipped the proper people to involve other people, teach others how to work. Now, when somebody wants something done a certain way, if it's not done that way, it's not been made according to the pattern. And you probably have hired people to do things, told them how you want it done, and got a bill when it wasn't done that way. Then you have real problems. Because if we wouldn't do it right the first time, it's very unlikely they'll fix it. So here you go. Well, you wouldn't have that problem here. You teach these men correctly how to do it. And then there's an interesting statement in 36:1 about Bezalel. He is to work himself. He has put wisdom and understanding to know how to do all manner of work. For the service of the sanctuary shall do according to all that Jehovah has commanded. So he was filled with wisdom of heart. And that the heart is where? Right? You would think here, filled with wisdom of heart to work all manner of workmanship, that would appeal especially to what part of the heart? Well, let's think about the heart. Don't tell me that doesn't look like a heart. We have the intellect, the what? The what? Right, we have the intellect, the will, and the emotion. All right? Bezalel is inspired to be able to teach others. He's inspired with wisdom of heart. What would you think probably, or to what would you think that probably appeals or references? The intellect. The intellect. So building the tabernacle is an intellectual undertaking. So he didn't just get a bunch of folks excited to do something and then turn them loose without having any instruction. So before one's will can be geared in the right direction, there has to be that intellect information. Christianity is an intellect religion. The religious world has made it an emotional religion. Because from the denominational world, you hear repetitively, well, I feel like. I feel like. That's an emotion. But what about the intellect? Are your feelings motivated by God's Word? Or is this just some emotional response? That's why it's important, before we get people to walk down the aisle, that they know why they're walking down the aisle. Before we get people to get into the baptistry, they know why they're getting into the baptistry, to what they are committing themselves. So he was filled with wisdom of heart to work all manner of workmanship of the engraver, a fabricator of material, of the skillful workman to weave material, of the embroider to variegate color, that is, put the colors together, fabrication, in blue and in purple and scarlet and in fine linen, of the weaver, you know what that is, even of them that do any workmanship and of those that devise skillful work. So you have all these kinds of people using a talent and ability. So we sing a song, we used to, I don't know if it's even in our book or not. There's a work in the kingdom for you, my brother. There's a work that we all can do. I may not have your talent, you may not have mine, but there's something we can do. And here you look at the people that are involved. And then in 36:1, he was to work himself. So he is not inspired just to tell everybody else what to do. The apostles were not inspired just to tell everybody else what to do. They were going to be witnesses, Acts 1. So they were out preaching and getting stoned, eventually dying for Christianity. So we really don't need, and we make a joke out of it sometimes, but notice that God didn't set up but one supervisor of this whole enterprise. And who was that?
Himself.
What'd you say? It was Moses. Moses is to see that it's done correctly. So they have a lot of workers, one supervisor. Questions or comments on Bezalel? Did I deal with the Spirit and answer your questions?
Yeah.
Right?
Since you got the Godhead up there and stuff, we have the indwelling of the Spirit. Could you say you have the indwelling of God and the other two?
If you're talking about Christians, yes. How God filled them with this wisdom, we're not told that it was any kind of indwelling.
Yeah, that's why I'm kind of asking is you hear of indwelling of the Spirit, but you could also say an indwelling of God.
If the text teaches that. The New Testament teaches that God, Christ, and the Spirit dwell in the Christian. So you can teach that. Back here, I don't know where you get an indwelling.
Right, it just made me think of people, saying, I was going back, to the New Testament, as far as Christians and stuff. You hear of indwelling of the Spirit and stuff, but since they're all one, you don't hear of somebody saying the indwelling of God in me.
Well, you could in the New Testament, because the text teaches the indwelling of all three members of the Godhead. Now, we can discuss how they indwell, but it does teach the indwelling for Christians, yes. And it is all three members of the Godhead. Okay? Anyone else? It's good. Good. I don't have Godhead up here. Anyone else? All right, let's move now to a holyoke. Number 2 on your outline, beyond our Strong's pronunciation, a holyoke, 31:6. And indeed I, see the emphasis there, have appointed with him Aholiab, the son of, and if you look at the little b under there, Salmach. Salmach is Aholiab's father. In English, if you don't go look up Strong's pronunciation, it looks like Ahisamach. And that's probably what you'll hear me call it. Of the tribe of Dan, and I have put wisdom in the hearts of all the gifted artisans, that they may make all that I have commanded you. So notice in verse 6, he was appointed by Jehovah. That first I at the start of verse 6 is emphatic in the original. It's there to show a stress. I. So don't get any ideas that Aholiab appointed himself, or that he took this on himself. I have appointed him. Now he's of the tribe of Dan. So you have Bezalel of the tribe of Judah, and now Aholiab of the tribe of Dan. And beginning, little c, at verse 34 of chapter 35 through 36, 1 and 2, you have his work. And it's interesting where we start here. He was to teach others how to work, verse 34 of chapter 35. He has put in his heart the ability to teach in him and Aholiab, the son of Ahisamach of the tribe of Dan. So he's teaching others how to work. In verse 35, he was filled with wisdom of heart to work all manner of workmanship, of the engraver, the skillful workman, the embroiderer, in blue and purple and scarlet and fine linen, of the weaver, even of them that do any workmanship, and of those that devise skillful works. So he's working this and teaching others how to do it. But then again, just like Bezalel, verse 1 of chapter 36, he was to work. So you have two particular people set forth in the people, the appointed workers, Bezalel and Aholiab. Any questions or comments on those two? Anyone? All right, there's a third group of workers, number 3 on your outline. The wise-hearted, or the skillful. Verse 6. I have appointed with him Aholiab, the son of Ahisamach, of the tribe of Dan, and I put wisdom in the hearts all the gifted artisans. So here are some other people that are inspired. God has put wisdom in their hearts. Wisdom and understanding. That they may make all that I have commanded them. And then in 36, 1 and 2, you have the same idea. Jehovah's put wisdom and understanding to know how to do the work that has been done. And if you'll notice that they are able to do according, verse 1 of 36, to A-L-L. And that's the Hebrew word kol, that means the whole. They are to do whatever work needs to be done for the service of the sanctuary. So there's not a thing that needs to be done for which there's not a prepared worker. So keep that in mind when you look at this idea of the inspired men. If you had a work, you had an equipped worker to do it, or workers to do it. So nothing is left to guess, to happenstance. It's all patterned out. Now, these are called the wise-hearted. Wisdom given them by God, the wise-hearted or the skillful ones. I do not believe we're going too far. If you do, you have the right to discuss. When we say, you check me out, from Genesis to Revelation, as our Bibles are laid out, I do not find any work of God that is to be done haphazardly, or just do something, whether what you're doing is the right thing or not, or it's done correctly. And when somebody comes up with this, we're just doing the best we can, you better make sure the best we can is what God said do. God never gave us His Word to just play at. He said, here's what I want done. Now do it that way. If you could just do something and it'd be all right, then we couldn't fuss with denominations. That's something religious. It's just not what God said do. So that's why this whole idea of, well, we just didn't know any better. Why not? We got the same book, the same pattern everybody else has. Why don't we know any better? So that's something we need to think about. It's my individual responsibility to know this book. It's not the elder's responsibility to make sure I know it, or the preacher's responsibility to get it drilled into me. Those may be tools that we use, but it's my responsibility to read it and do it. Yes.
I liked your point when you made it about teaching them. And I thought about Jesus saying this in Luke 14:28. And He said, for which you, desiring to build a tower, does not count, or first sit down and count the cost.
Whether he's able to build it, or else they're going to laugh at him.
Right.
And say he tried to build, but he was unable to complete. So Jesus is saying, that's Luke 14, Jesus is saying, count the cost of following me.
Absolutely.
It's going to cost you something.
Right.
Don't come if you aren't prepared to pay the cost. And the fact that they wouldn't be able to complete it would mean, if they started out following him, and they did not make the commitment, they'd fall away. And if you go to John 6, when Jesus taught a hard saying, the text says, many of his disciples came out from beside him, walked around behind him, turned around and walked away. That's the Greek picture there. And walked with him no more. And so much so that Jesus looked at the apostles and said, would you also go away? So here's some people that followed him. Now, you read John 6, and Jesus will tell them, you didn't follow me because of the miracles you saw. You were not convinced I was the Messiah. You followed me because you ate the bread and were filled, and you want me to be a bread factory for you. Now, I have to be careful here. I'll be on my soapbox too long. I liken that to this playing atmosphere that some people want in the church. Keep me happy. Do things I enjoy. Make it fun for me. If you don't, I'll go somewhere else. And they will. If I get people to attend Smyrna because I'm feeding them coffee and donuts, if I cut out the coffee and donuts, they'll go somewhere else that feeds them. Because they're coming for that. And that's why I say so much to our teachers. If these kids need to eat, take them somewhere and feed them. But don't use food as an incentive to bribe a kid to come to Bible class. Because if they're coming for the food, they aren't learning. They're just enduring your class till you get to the snack. And I believe when April and Tia did the teacher's workshop, they made a big point about that. And you can give trinkets and food, and you can get a lot of kids coming if you want to. And we proved that back in the 70s with the bus minister. You can bribe a lot of kids to ride the bus and come to church house. But if the denomination down the road upped the ante, they can get on their bus. And we just had it happen over and over and over. I'm back off my soapbox now. So y'all didn't put that on that soapbox. All right, other questions and comments now on these two workers and the wise-hearted or the skillful. Notice number 4. One writer said, the methods of working here spoken of are, all of them, such as were well known in Egypt at the time, and which, consequently, it would have been quite natural for some of the Israelites to have learned. That'll tell you it's an old writer that wrote that old English word. So that time, that 215 years they spent in Egypt, was not only a time of an iron furnace, task work, taskmasters, but what they were doing down there, they were learning skills. And they were gaining knowledge that's going to be used right here. So when you're coming to Bible class, you're listening to a sermon, you're studying your Bible, you are equipping yourself for who knows what down the road. When that's exactly the knowledge you will need to do whatever it is you're up against. I've had people come into my library and say, you read all these books? No. I've probably read some in all of them. But sometimes I have moved a book for 30 years, never needed it, till I started studying a certain subject, and that's the one book I had to have. And had I not gotten it back down here, most times it's out of print. It would not have helped me up here. Well, that's what you're doing when you're learning. You're building skills, you're learning things will help you on down the road. I think of elders. Elders cannot be a novice, cannot be a young convert. That means as they grow, they should be picking up knowledge and skill that's going to help them serve when it comes that time for them to serve. Same thing with deacons, young preachers. Just learn from everybody and take the good and throw the bad away. Questions or comments? That make sense? All right, look at F in your outline. Now look at the ability of the workers. Now you have all these skills and you have all these things to be done. And this provided for the several ability of the workers. Turn to Matthew 25. We're all familiar with the man traveling to a far country, called his servants, verse 14, and delivered his goods to them. Now look at verse 15. And to one he gave 5 talents, to another 2, and to another 1. Now look at it. To each, according to his, if you're reading King James American Standard, I believe you have several ability. His own ability. And immediately he went on a journey. He did not give the 2-talent man 5 talents. He did not give the 1-talent man 2 talents because he didn't have the ability to use it. So he gave to each worker what he had the ability to do. I see the same thing right here. The building of the tabernacle. And one of the hardest lessons I ever had to learn as a young preacher was I cannot do everything. I don't know how to do everything. I tried and made a mess out of a lot of stuff before I ever learned that lesson. I don't know how to do everything. I don't know every answer to every question. I'll try to find it, but I don't know it. And you don't know how to do everything. So learn what you can do and learn how to do other stuff if you can, but do what you do well. And that's what the 2-talent man, the 5-talent man did. My ag teacher used to say, if all you can do is dig ditches, be the best ditch digger in the country. Use whatever ability you have, and especially in the service of God. So this provided for the several ability of the workers, or made this observation. Gifts are not all alike, yet God can use all. Some are made to lead, others to serve and follow in the work of God's kingdom. We glorify God most when unambitiously content to fill, if you mark in your Bible, in your notes, to fill our own place. When not envious of the gift of others. Diversity of gifts gives rise to division of labor. Bezalel and Aholiab, though of different tribes, wrought or worked together as friends, were not opposed as rivals. Now you think about singing. If you're going to have harmony, if you're going to have 4-part harmony, you have 4 parts. Now everybody can't sing soprano. And everybody can't sing alto. And everybody can't sing tenor, and everybody can't sing bass. Oh, you can sing. The Lord said everybody can make a joyful noise. And in 4-part harmony, your noise will fall somewhere in the vicinity of soprano, alto, tenor, and bass. It will be somewhere in that vicinity. But everybody can't sing the same part. That's how you have harmony. You have people doing what they do and then blending it together. Let's take 10 here. All right, we're looking at F, the ability of the workers. We Notice this provided for the several ability of each worker. Each one could use his talents. Notice number 2, no worker was expected to do the work of another. So you're not expected to do my work. I have fussed about the way we say things a lot and tried to change the way I say a lot of things. But over the years, if I was gone, I have had people say that so-and-so would take my place on that given Sunday or Wednesday. That's bad terminology. They're in their own place. They just happen to be in a place I normally would fill. But they aren't really taking my place. They can't take my place. They can't do my work. They're doing their own work. That makes sense to you? So think about when we have a guest speaker, they aren't taking my place. They are doing their work here. While generally, I'm doing work somewhere else. So each worker is expected to do his own work, not somebody else's. Now, we've all probably worked, if we work secular work, where we have taken up the slack of some of our fellow workers. Because if we didn't, it wouldn't get done. And if it didn't get done, it was harder on all of us. So we did our work and theirs too. But in reality, we just made their work our work. We were doing our work. One writer said, number 3, the Bible is a textbook of instruction on the dignity of labor. It has no sympathy with the contemptible foolishness which looks on labor as degrading. I have dealt with people who believe that work was introduced into the world because of the sin of Adam and Eve. And you remember the Lord said to Adam, the sweat of your brow you will make your living from the earth, and it'll have thorns and thistles. If you go back to Genesis 2, before the sin ever happened, Adam was put in the garden to dress and keep it. There's work. So work was never introduced as a punishment for the sin of Adam. Work was there before the sin ever came. So God doesn't put up with folks who look on work as degrading. And you see that here. Any questions or comments on that? In verses 7 through 11, I told you now there's great detail. There are given the appointed things that are to be made. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about each one because we're going to look at each one as we move through. But in verse 7, there's the tent of meeting. The New King James calls it the tabernacle of meeting. And then there's the ark of the testimony. Now the ark of the testimony would also be called what? Ark of the covenant. Why would it also be called the ark of the testimony? Got the 10 words in it. Testimony of Jehovah. And the mercy seat that is thereupon, so that's your cherubim on top of the Ark of the Covenant with their wings touching. All the furniture of the tent, the table and its vessels, the pure, you may have lampstand or candlestick with all its vessels, the altar of incense, the altar of burnt offering with all its vessels, the laver with its base, the finely wrought garments, the holy garments for Aaron the priest, and the garments of his sons to minister in the priest office, the anointing oil, and the incense of sweet spices. detail the holy place. So all of these things are listed in these verses. So you move down, verses 7 through 11. Now you might think, how would they get all they need to be able to build this elaborate sounding tabernacle? If you look at 36:3. Start in verse 2. Then Moses called Bezalel and Aholiab and every gifted artisan in whose heart Jehovah had put wisdom, everyone whose heart was stirred or whose heart was willing to come and do the work. Right? So you have lifted up hearts. And they received from Moses all the offering which the children of Israel had brought for the work of the service of making the sanctuary. So they continued bringing to him free will offerings every morning. Free will offerings. They did not hold a bake sale to raise money for the building of the tabernacle. They did not have a yard sale to raise money for the building of the tabernacle. They did not solicit funds from all the nations around them to build the tabernacle. Where did they get what they needed to build the tabernacle? They gave it. And that's the way the Lord has ordained for the church to get its funds. We do not ask people on the outside to contribute. I've been on radio and TV for over 50 years now, and not one time in any program in which I've ever been involved have I ever asked anybody who's not a member of the church to give a dime for us to have these programs on the air.
Amen.
We are to support our work. And I believe every congregation in which I work had the money in the congregation to do what the Lord said we ought to do. We just have to make up our minds we're willing to give. And these folks did. And so they continued, the text says, bringing to Moses free will offerings. And notice, how often did they bring them? Every morning. So when Moses got up in the morning, he may not have known what all was going to happen that day, but he knew one thing. There's going to be a steady stream of people bringing gifts to build this tabernacle. And that's a wonderful thing to see and a wonderful thing to have. Now, do you have questions or comments on this overview of the building of the tabernacle before we get into the specifics of the building? All right, I want to make 3 observations concerning a comparison of what we've read for the church. Number 1, like the tabernacle, the church was built according to God's instructions. It was not a haphazard thing. Matthew 16, 13 to 19, when they came into the parts, you read the King James, the coast there, that's what that means, the region, the parts, not a body of water with land around it. The parts of Caesarea Philippi, Jesus asked his disciples, saying, "Who do men say that I, the Son of Man, am?" So he asked them for the common opinion. And they gave him the common opinion. Some say you're John the Immerser, some Elijah, some Jeremiah, some one of the prophets. And then he asked a crucial question. Whom say you that I am? Simon Peter made the confident confession. He said, "You are the Christ, the Son of the living God." Jesus confirmed his deity by responding, "Oh, how blessed are you, Simon, John's son. For flesh and blood did not reveal this unto you, but my Father who is in heaven." And then he predicted the coming conquering church. "And upon this rock I say to you that you are a pebble, but upon this ledge rock I will build my church. I called out ones, I called out assembly, and the gates of Hades shall not prevent this from being done." The unseen world of the dead won't hold me to prevent my establishing the church. So in Ephesians 1, 22 and 23, God put all things under Christ's feet, gave him to be head over all things to the church, which is his body, the fullness of him who fills all in all. And every chapter in the book of Ephesians deals with the church. And I've given you some references in chapter 2, 3, and 5. Now the church is built up when Christians follow God's instructions. Look at 1 John 2. Beginning verse 3. "Now by this we," what? There's your word, David. I believe you taught on this one night. "By this we know that we," what? Now that's assurance. We know that we know him. How? All right, we keep his commandments. Now, he who says, "I know him," and does not keep his commandments is a liar, and the truth is not in him. So I can say all day long, I'm in fellowship with Christ. If I don't do what he tells me to do, I'm not in fellowship with Christ. Contrast, but whoever keeps his word, truly the love of God has been completed, is perfected in him. By this we know that we are in him. Now notice, we know that we know him if we keep his commandments. We know that we're in him if we keep his commandments. How do we get into him?
Baptized into him, Galatians 3 and 27.
And?
6,
Okay, 4. Galatians 3, 27, Romans 6, 4. We get into him by being baptized into him. And we know that we're in him if we keep his commandments. He who says he abides in him ought, that's an ethical term, himself also to walk just as he walked. So you can say you abide in him, but if you aren't imitating him, walking like he walked, you're just making an empty claim. Brethren, I write no new commandment to you, but an old commandment which you've had from the beginning. The old commandment is the word which you heard from the beginning. Again, a new commandment I write to you, which thing is true in him and in you, because the darkness is passing away and the true light is already shining. He who says he is in the light and hates his brother is in darkness until now. He who loves his brother abides in the light, verse 5, that's where God is. And where there is no cause for stumbling in him, or there is no cause of stumbling in him. But he who hates his brother is in darkness and walks in darkness and does not know where he is going, because the darkness has blinded his eyes. Now flip over to chapter 5. Look at verse 3. For this is the love of God, that we keep his commandments, and his commandments are not, you may have, grievous, not burdensome. All right, so church is built according to God's instructions. It's built up, edified, when Christians follow God's instructions. So the number one comparison, the church is built according to God's instructions. Questions or comments? Number two, like the tabernacle, the church was built by good leadership. The apostles followed the word of the Christ and taught that word to those who became Christians. Now that's Acts and Romans through Jude. And throughout, and I've given you a number of references there, you have the leadership of the apostles, and you have their teaching people the gospel. You bring people like Timothy, Titus, Epaphroditus, and Onesimus, Philemon, and on, who are being taught the truth. So you have the apostles teaching the truth to others, others teaching others. And number three, like the tabernacle, the church is built up with the liberal giving of its members. Now 1 Corinthians 16, 1 and 2, and 2 Corinthians 8 and 9 have to do with a specific contribution, just like this contribution to the tabernacle. That contribution was for the poor saints in Judea. Paul was collecting that among the Gentile churches, going to take it to Jerusalem to try to convince the Jewish Christians that the Gentiles were in fellowship with him. And he was saying to them, look what the Gentiles are doing to help you. You are despising the Gentiles. You think they have to be circumcised and keep the law? Look at what these Gentile Christians are doing. And you have that free will giving. The Macedonians, who were in deep poverty, begging to have a part in it. So I believe those three observations are in order for us as we think about the building of the tabernacle. If you have questions or comments on this building of the tabernacle? Anyone? You can either stop it or edit it, whichever you'd like to do. All right, in this section, everyone have the handout? Chapter 25, verses 10 through 40. And chapter 37, verses 1 through 9. We will deal with the building of the ark, the table, and the candlestick. Now, I often refer to it as the lampstand. But I'm dealing with the same thing. So whatever I say, either lampstand or candlestick, we're talking about the very same thing. Okay, are we ready to roll now? All right, we start with the pattern for the Ark of the Covenant. And we look at the preeminence of the ark itself. Look at chapter 25, verse 10, beginning. Look at this ark of the covenant. Now, I'll show you some pictures as we move along, but if you're using a Dixon Study Bible, I believe in your back section, or either right after Exodus or Leviticus or Numbers, somewhere in there, you have a picture of the tabernacle. You have how it's set up. I think Thompson Chain will give you the same thing in your references back there. I think it will. And it may be in your table of contents. but I've given you one as a handout. So you need to familiarize yourself with the layout of the tabernacle and what's where. Particularly what's where, as we begin to look at this. Now, A, under Roman numeral 1, the preeminence of the ark. Number 1, Roper stated, evidently he began with that which was most holy, the ark of the covenant with the mercy seat, and moved outward to the furnishings of the holy place. Right? So we are then looking from the most holy place to the court. And behind the veil, this is the Ark of the Covenant. And you have the mercy seat, all right? So he begins in the most holy place and goes outward. So you have the preeminence of the ark. Now, number 2, the ark led the nation when it moved. We have not covered Numbers, but in Numbers 10, when the ark is ready to move, there at Sinai, and then the cloud rises, which is a signal, it's time to move. The text says that the ark would lead. So look at Numbers 10. Verse 33. So they departed. Do you all have from the mountain of Jehovah or the mountain of the Lord? Everybody have that? Now that's what? What? Sinai. On a journey of 3 days, now notice this, and the ark of the covenant of Jehovah went before them for the 3 days' journey to search out a resting place for them. Now that's on this particular journey. The ark won't always go before them when they march, but it does here. Then turn to Psalms 132. And if you have kept the 3,405 trees worth of handout material I've given you, you have an outline on Psalms 132. And in verse 8, arise, O Jehovah, to your resting place, you and the ark of your strength. Now, while this is a song of ascent that was sung after the return, the reference here is to Jehovah's leading the people with the cloud, and in this case, with the ark. In 2 Chronicles, chapter 6, in the chronicler's account of Solomon's prayer of dedication of the ark of the temple, in verse 41, now therefore arise, O Jehovah God, to your resting place, you and the ark of your strength. Let your priest, O Jehovah God, be clothed with salvation, and let your saints rejoice in goodness. Here, Jehovah is called upon to arise and enter the temple, his resting place. And in doing so, would enter the most holy place, his resting place. Jehovah's presence in the temple is signified by the presence of the ark of his strength. Turn to Psalm 78. Verse 60. So that he forsook, now you need with the so, that's a comparison. A simile sometimes use like, and as, and so. So you need to read what's above it. They're provoking Jehovah and he is responding. So that he forsook his tabernacle of Shiloh. Now, Shiloh is where you read about the tabernacle being set up in 1 Samuel 1. The tent he had placed among men, and he delivered his strength, that would be Israel there, into captivity, and his glory into the enemy's hand. The ark of his strength would dwell among them, and his presence in the Shekinah, in the most holy place, would signify his dwelling among his strength, which would be Israel. Now if you turn to 1 Samuel 4, this is during the days of Eli, Hophni and Phinehas, when the Philistines were defeating the Israelites, took the Ark of the Covenant and brought it out of Shiloh and marched it into the battle, as if to say, there's magic in this Ark. If we bring this Ark out here, Jehovah won't ever let that Ark be taken. And we'll win this battle. Verse 11, also the Ark of God was captured. The two sons of Eli, Hophni and Phinehas, died. So the Ark was taken away from Shiloh because they had made it a good luck charm. See, if Jehovah had been in fellowship with them, the Ark could have stayed in Shiloh and they still would have won the battle. I'm afraid if we're not careful, some people make the church building a good luck charm. As long as I sit in a church house one time a week, I ought to be okay. Everything ought to be all right. Now, this is the first mention of the ark in Psalm 78, though it's implied in the previous verses. In the Psalms, though, this is the only reference to the ark by name. That's interesting. One writer said, the fact that the ark is regarded as the ark of your might or your mighty ark reminds the readers of those instances when grave disasters befell men who ventured to treat the ark without due respect. And you read those passages in 1st and 2nd Samuel. The Philistines captured the ark, took it to Dagon's house. Dagon, their god. Next morning, Dagon was flat on his face. And the only way Dagon could get up was for one of the priests to come set him up. Which should have illustrated, you people ought to be able to see through a ladder and see that you're serving a God that can't get himself up off the ground unless you pick him up. Well, they picked him up. Next day, he was broken when he fell. So they said, we don't know what to do with this ark, so they sent it to one of the other cities of the Philistines. That was really big of them. And they moved that thing around among the 5 cities of the Philistines, and Jehovah afflicted every one of them. And finally, they put it on a cart with some oxen, and the oxen took it back to Israel. They treated it disrespectfully. Same thing with Uzzah, and I think a lot of people miss Uzzah. David, you remember, got upset with Jehovah when Jehovah struck Uzzah when he stabilized the ark when the oxen stumbled. And David was upset and wouldn't bring the ark to Jerusalem. It wasn't Jehovah's fault. Jehovah said, move it with the staves. And nobody should have touched it with the staves of the Levites. And not just every Levite, a certain family of the Levites. And Uzzah touched it and violated the sanctity of that ark. Number 3, the failure of the Ark of the Covenant to lead the Israelites into battle against the Canaanites showed those who sought to do so acted without Jehovah's authority. In Numbers 14, you remember they get to the borderland of Canaan in Numbers 13. And if you put the whole account of Deuteronomy and Numbers together, you'll find they got a bright idea. They said to Moses, let's send some folks out to spy out the land. And Jehovah allowed them to have their way. Why spy out a land that Jehovah says I'm giving? All I want you to do is go take it. I'm giving it to you. Their bright idea was, let's go see if we can take it. Now that was their problem before they ever sent the spies out. They doubted Jehovah's word. So they had to go try to reassure themselves they could take it. So they sent how many spies? 12 spies. Why not 13?
12 tribes, Israel. Only 12 tribes.
13 tribes.
The Levites, they were the priests.
Sir?
So the Levites were the priests.
Okay, but they're a tribe. What? All right, only the tribes that had men of war. The Levites didn't have any men of war. So he sent 12 spies. And they went and saw the land. Was the land exactly the way Jehovah said it was? Exactly. They came back, said it's a good land, brought back that fruit. Then they said, Jehovah didn't tell us about those high wall cities and those giants down there. And how many of them said, we just can't take that? 10 of them. How many of them said, let's rise up at once and go take it? 2 of them. And they were Joshua and Caleb. And the children of Israel listened to the 10 spies. And the text says they discouraged the hearts of the Israelites. And Jehovah said, you're going to die in this wilderness. They said, you brought us out here to kill us and our children. Jehovah said, you're going to die in this wilderness. Your children will take Canaan. Then, in chapter 14, they decided, beginning verse 39, after all that Jehovah said it's going to happen to them, well, we'll go take it now. And they were told, don't go, because Jehovah is not in fellowship with you. They went anyway, and many were slain. The ark did not lead them. The implication seems to be, had they done what Jehovah said do, the ark would have led them into Canaan, which is precisely what happened when they finally went into it. Number 4, the ark was prominent in crossing Jordan into Canaan. Joshua 3:1 through 4:11. Now, the ark represented the covenant. That's why it's called the Ark of the Covenant. The ark represented the covenant-keeping God, the Ark of the Covenant of Jehovah. And you will have Lord in all caps. Number 3, the ark represented their commitment to Jehovah, the Ark of the Covenant of Jehovah, your God. There are your 3 points on the representation of the ark. In Joshua 6, 1-27, the ark led the assault on Jericho, marched around that wall. The ark led. Number 6, the ark was misused by Israel, as I mentioned. They made a good luck charm out of it, instead of realizing its holy representation of Jehovah. And then, in moving the ark around among those 5 Canaanite cities, Philistine cities, the ark proved the superiority of Jehovah over idols. Questions or comments on the priority of the ark? Anyone? Now in verses 10-12 of chapter 25, we look at the pattern for the ark. And they shall make an ark of, now if you're reading from the King James, you have shittim wood. The American Standard and New King James, acacia wood. 2.5 cubits its length, 1.5 cubits its width, and 1.5 cubits its height. Acacia wood is said to be one of the most incorruptible of woods. Now notice the pattern. Look at how specific it is. I made 3 observations under there for you. Since God had commanded Noah to build an ark, and that's a different word you'll notice, of gopher wood, would it have been all right for Moses to allow Bezalel to build this ark of gopher wood instead of acacia wood? Why not?
It wasn't what Isaac saw. It's what he wanted instructed.
But he'd already authorized gopher wood. What?
Said he didn't break that out. That was the ark.
So?
That would have been Moses taking the lead and not God taking the lead, wouldn't it?
But God's already authorized gopher wood.
Only
That
for
was
the
back in-
ark.
That was for the.
What?
That was back.
Only for Noah's ark.
Only for Noah's ark, not Moses' ark. Not the ark of the covenant. Number 1, they're 2 different things, aren't
Yeah.
they? See, the folks who want to get rid of the Bible make fun of the Bible when it comes to the ark, because they don't differentiate between Noah's ark and the Ark of the Covenant. So they say, look how silly. Look how big Noah's ark was, and you get over to Joshua, or you get into the wilderness wanderings, and here they are thinking they can carry that ark around on staves. So if you don't know they're 2 different arks, 2 different words, you'll draw some wrong conclusions. So if Jehovah authorized gopher wood for the ark, that doesn't mean, for Noah's ark, doesn't mean he's authorizing it for the Ark of the Covenant. And he gives a generic command or a specific command regarding wood. Which one? Specific. Use acacia wood or shittim wood. Now, these arguments that may seem a little bit humorous are arguments you need to use when you're studying with people who say it's okay to do stuff God hadn't authorized. And one of the things is instrumental music. One of the things that people who want to use instrumental music say, well, God authorized it in the Old Testament. And He did. But He didn't authorize it in the church. So you can use, see if they get all wrapped up in that, you can use this wood right here. Don't have anything back up here, and they ought to be able to see it. That makes sense to you? Little B, since Moses' mother made an ark of bulrushes in which to hide him, would it have been all right for Moses to allow Bezalel to build this ark of bulrushes instead of acacia wood? And that's just the same argument using a different thing. Little C, when God specifies a type of wood, one wood is not as good as another. When the Lord requires a specific thing, nothing else can be substituted for it. Saying it makes no difference does not change the case. Let me tell you why this is important. One church is as good as another. That's the denominational argument.
There's only one.
And it's amazing to me. The denominations that argue one church is as good as another won't apply that to us. One church is as good as another as long as it's not the Lord's church. No, we don't go along with those folks. And that's amazing.
But, and there's a big argument I've always heard is, we're all trying to get to the same place.
Yeah, we're all going to the same place, we're just going different ways. When I was a boy preacher, one of the denominational preachers in our town came to our building one day and introduced himself. We went back to my study and sat down, we were talking, and he said, I've come to invite you to join the Ministerial Association. That was an association of all the denominational preachers around. But he said, now I would need to be fair to tell you that there are some preachers who do not want you to join. And I said, well, I understand that because I couldn't participate with you in your Easter sunrise service. I couldn't participate with you in your Christmas services celebrating Christmas as the birth of Christ. I couldn't participate with you in a lot of your activities that imply one church is as good as another. And he said, well, I drove a Granada at that time, and I forget what he drove, but he said, you drive a Granada and I drive, and he called the name of it. He said, we both get to the destination. And I said, yes. But now if the Lord said to drive a Granada, you'd be out in the cold, wouldn't you? And the Lord said, this is my church. And it's not made up of all the denominations. And he decided he had elsewhere to be. And that ended that discussion. One church is good as another as long as it's not the Lord's church. So I'm giving you these arguments anticipating that you're going to be out studying with people, which is where the Lord told you to go. So I'm trying to give you some tools that you can use. Any questions or comments on what we've done so far? Now, because of the weather and we have several who are out, I'm going to wait to begin the dimensions of the ark and so forth next time. Please be careful going to your cars. I don't know whether it's slippery or not.